Hey everybody, welcome back to Ken Michaels Radio, where we talk all the time about the Beatles, the group, the solo years, anything that comes to mind. You never know what to expect on this show, but one thing I definitely enjoy doing is talking to authors, and we've had plenty of them here on this channel. Aaron Badgley is back with us. You might recall that not too long ago, he was here to talk about his book called Dark Horse Records. And it's really cool to get this book because where else are you going to find out about all the artists that were on George's label and George's involvement with them, backgrounds on all the bands and artists who were on Dark Horse. Well, Aaron has a brand new book out, and this time it's on Ringo, and it's called Got to Pay Your Dues. And it covers really just the 70s, really specializes in that decade in Ringo's solo career. So welcome back, Aaron. Good to have you with us.
It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and thank you for having me on again. I really, really appreciate it, and thanks for plugging the books. I couldn't thank you more. Thank you.
Well, I'm always grateful, and I find it fascinating in this day and age when you think everything's been written about the Beatles, and people find the holes of what's not really covered in detail. And I have to tell everyone before we get into this conversation that I think this book is really essential because any book where I learn anything new, I find worthwhile. And the one thing that you're going to take away from this book is in this one decade, how much Ringo did. He was extremely active. And it wasn't just the singles and the albums. He had his acting career and the films he put out. He had his own record label. And Aaron goes into all this here on this book. You wind up being exhausted at the end, realizing, God, Ringo did all this. And I know for a fact that as someone who loves what I call the side projects of the Beatles, songs where they perform as musicians for other artists or produced other artists or wrote for other artists, that goes back to the Harry Castleman, Walter Podrazik books of All Together Now and the Beatles Again and the End of the Beatles. And those two gentlemen were just on this channel to talk about that whole series. And then that later on, well, Chris Englehart took the helm after that and did that kind of work. And, you find out about many of these recordings that Ringo was involved with in the 70s in this book as well, and in more detail. So why don't we just start by asking why did you just want to cover the 70s?
And before I answer that, I just want to say I loved your conversation with Walter and Harry. I thought
Yeah.
it was because I'm a big fan of those books, and actually, I love your show.
Oh,
Thumbs up.
thank you.
I thought that for me, there's a lot of misconception of Ringo in the '70s, and I think that I wanted to write a book. Look, he did a lot besides Photograph, Don't Get Me Easy, Back Off Boogaloo. He was a very busy guy. If you look at his work during that decade, it was pretty tireless. Like he just kept going, and I was fascinated by it. Ken, to be really honest with you, I was really fascinated by it. But I also wanted to kind of say to people, look, he did a lot of weird and wacky things too, like the Kinky Friedman album that people, which is great. And the Guthrie Thomas album, he wrote a song that Ringo's never recorded that he gave to Guthrie Thomas. How many songs did Ringo give away in his career? So that's basically for me, it was like, there's so many great books out. I mean, I have five shelves, six shelves, 10 shelves of Beatle books, and they're so great. And I just thought, well, one thing that was kind of missing was all this kind of an in-depth look at Ringo's solo. So I knew I couldn't cover all the solo career from 1970 to now. So I thought I'll just focus on the 70s for now and see how it goes.
Yeah. And you could do a whole book just on Ringo touring now because he's been doing it
Yes.
since 1989. That's such a big part of his career. And one thing that I came to the conclusion of here, and there's a moment in your book where you said Ringo gave an interview in 1976 on Australian TV where he actually brings up the idea of having an all-star band to tour with. And it's
Yeah.
like, why didn't you do it back then? I mean, one of the reasons I think why Ringo's sales really started to slip was that, he didn't make videos for every single. He gave interviews, but sometimes, like in the case of when he signed with Polydor and Atlantic, they were all in Europe. I
Yeah.
mean, how do you expect your records to continue to sell fairly well, something consistent with Ringo and Goodnight Vienna as albums, and you learn all that in this book because I think Ringo kind of felt that maybe because he was a Beatle, he's a name everyone recognizes, the name alone would carry it, that would carry his records. And maybe it was a learning curve for him that didn't guarantee success. But you certainly you give so much credit to Ringo for all he did because being very active, being very giving to people, drumming on so many people's albums, writing for people, and it's there's enough to talk about from the 70s alone, which is what I picked up from this book. But let me also start by asking, because at the very beginning of the book, you said from the very beginning, Ringo was your favorite Beatle. Why is that?
I think, as a kid, yeah, my first glimpses of the Beatles were A Hard Day's Night and Out, and he was funny and he was personable. And every time I would look at the Beatles, he just seemed to, Paul was this good looking. I mean, they're all good looking, but Paul was the cute Beatle, and George was the intellectual, quiet Beatle, and John was his issue. He was very outspoken and all that. And there was Ringo, and Ringo just like, seemed to be there supporting the band all the time. If you watch the Hey Jude clip or All You Need Is Love, or he was just a solid member of the band of the Friends. He was a good friend to the other three. And you know, I was what, 6 years old when my parents bought Sentimental Journey because they liked the songs on it. And so from that point on, it was just kind of Ringo was always front and center for me, which is not to say, by the way, everybody, I love the other three too. And I someone once asked me, do I have a favorite Beatle? I don't have a favorite Beatle. It's like I don't have a favorite daughter, but I love them differently.
Uh,
You know? But Ringo seemed to, and I don't think there was a lot expected from him. When the Beatles split up, I think there was kind of like George and Ringo were both kind of, well, let's see what they can do. And then George out of the box. I mean, he already put out two solo albums, but then when he comes out with All Things Must Pass, it
uh,
shakes the world by storm. I mean, literally by storm. John had already proven himself with Instant Karma, Give Peace a Chance, and of course, Live Peace in Toronto. Then he comes out with John Lennon, Plastic Ono Band, and Yoko Ono, Plastic Ono Band, two landmark albums. McCartney, the work he did with Badfinger, they were. And here's Ringo, that he's doing an album of oldies. Interesting. But he was 10 years ahead of the curve, right? I mean, before Harry Nilsson, Linda Ronstadt, Carly Simon, Paul McCartney, you know?
I've always brought that up when it comes to Sentimental Journey, but then he wasn't trying to start any trends. It's just what he felt like doing in the moment.
No, he wasn't trying. No, he just it was in his own way getting back to his roots. And when I was my daughter read the book, and her takeaway from the book was Ringo was really steeped in the past in the 70s. He was really in touch with Liverpool and his roots and his family, rock and roll. He was doing all new stuff, progressive stuff with T-Rex and all that. But in the background, he's doing country music, which he grew up with. That was really important to Ringo growing up. And we all know, like, Please Please Me is based on a Bing Crosby, it's not based on, but influenced by a Bing Crosby song, Please Hear My
Right.
Please. And Do You Want to Know a Secret comes from Snow White, you know? Do you want to know a secret? Promise Not to Tell? We were by the wishing well. So the Beatles had this love of all that stuff. Of course, they grew up with it, same way as I grew up with the Beatles. So my reference point for everything at 61 is the Beatles. Maybe sometimes Roxy Music, but we won't get into that. So it made sense that Ringo was kind of and I wanted to take the book as kind of like he's starting new. It's as if it was a new solo artist starting in 1970. Cat Stevens, Neil Diamond, whoever you want to say, Laura Nyro, whoever. It's like he's a new artist because he was. I mean, he was a solo Beatle, but that can only go so far, right?
But you would have expected him to make a rock album, a pop rock album.
But you know what? With all four of the Beatles, you've come to expect the unexpected, right?
Yeah,
Like, would anyone have expected McCartney's first album to be so lo-fi? Now they use the term lo-fi nowadays,
yeah.
but given his track record with the Beatles, I don't think anyone anticipated the McCartney, which is a brilliant album. But I agree. I think people probably thought Ringo would come out of the box with a rock album with some of his friends, Eric Clapton, Stephen Stills,
Right.
members of Badfinger. But think about this too, like he brought John Tavener to Apple, which is a
Mm,
classical artist.
right.
So he was bringing weird stuff to Apple, and not that it's weird, but you know what I mean. Like it's not Badfinger or Mary Hopkin or Jackie Lomax. So yeah, I agree. I think it took everyone, and it did extremely well. Top 10 album in the UK, and it did well here in Canada. And I think it's sad, right? Because in 1970, you needed to sell 1 million copies to go gold. That album sold 650,000, which should qualify as a gold album now.
Hmm.
And uh, they should have had a gold album. Now, and then to follow that up with a very traditional country album. I'm
Right.
sure, fans of 1970 didn't know, what the heck he was coming up with. Maybe a polka album, you know.
I wouldn't put it past him.
I'd buy it. How
But
about you? One.
you could look at the start of his career as either he's experimenting, he's trying to, you know what direction to go in, not really being sure. Um, it's how do you look at starting a career that way when you're doing the unexpected? I mean, look, the Beatles, they recorded virtually every style of music there was to the
Yeah.
point where nothing would shock me. But it's kind of like what you said about the first McCartney album. Depending on how you look at John, do you look at his first albums as the ones with Yoko, the experimental stuff, or studio-wise Plastic Ono Band, which was so different from everything else at the time? George Harrison, you either look at Wonderwall music and electronic sound, or you look at All Things Must Pass, which, just from the sheer volume of all the great songs that he put out on there, plus the Apple Jam, shocked the whole world. And here's Ringo, with two albums here, and it's not what you would expect. And even the first Wings album was not what you would expect. He's trying to establish a brand new band here, and he puts together an album which took him just, a couple of weeks to put together and very spontaneous. It's like nothing was done that would typically be done by most artists.
Yeah, and this is an argument I've had for a long time. I remember when I was working full time in radio, and I was working at an alternative station, and
Mm,
I played a Ringo Starr track from Old Wave, and someone said, "Well, that's not alternative," and I said, "Well, it is actually because you're not hearing it anywhere else. It's not on the charts. It's an alternative to what's in the top 40. The term alternative doesn't necessarily mean it's got to be something recorded that's so bizarre. It just means it's something different from what's being played on the regular radio." I look at his first two albums as experimental. I think in their own way, they're his electronic sounding Wonderwall music, or Two Virgins and Life of the Lions. Maybe not as extreme, but still experimental because, as you said, no one saw this one coming. And great care was put into both the albums. When you look at the work that went into Sentimental Journey, produced by George Martin, the 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 sheer talent that arranged some of the songs, like, and some of the classic composers and arrangers, but it was still, in my books, an experimental album because it would be, it was like the Carnival of Light, which we've never heard, but you don't expect the Beatles to do a Pink Floyd 1967 Sid Barrett Freakout, but apparently they did. So I mean, and I think both of those albums have aged remarkably well. I think they're more appreciated now than they were, 50, 60 years ago. I think now that people kind of go, oh, okay, yeah, I get it. And I wish Ringo would kind of promote them more than he does, because he doesn't really discuss them all that much. Even when he did Look Up recent last year, I kept thinking, come on, man, sell Buku Blues, because that's a great album. And,
yeah,
and great cover too. John Kosh, who I think he did a great job with that sleeve design. But well, Sentimental Journey has a cool sleeve design too, right? I mean, it's very interesting.
the Empress Pub, which was right around the corner from his apartment, you know.
Which looks very different now.
In what way?
Well, they have a big mural on the side, and it's very much promoting Ringo, which is nice. But when you go to the tour and you see it, it's all painted, and it's all kind of vaguely psychedelic. Still there. It's kind of cool. I want, get out there and do my picture.
The whole idea of every song having a different arranger was a very different approach in making um, the album. Was that all George Martin's idea, or did Ringo just, discuss that with George, or what?
Ringo discussed it with George, and I kind of think it laid the blueprint for the Ringo album, if you kind of think about it, because on the Ringo album you have the band backing him on one track, and then you have, you know, T. Mark Bolan playing on another track, and you had George on another. So I think Ringo was smart enough to know he said in an interview, and I don't know if I quoted it in my book because I went through a lot of interviews, but he said in one interview he wanted to keep the album interesting, and he felt that if he used different arrangers, that you wouldn't get like just a standard. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like I'm going to be critical, but you listen to a Bing Crosby album, say from 1960, and it's, beautifully produced, but the arrangements it's very similar throughout the entire album. Whereas if you listen to Sentimental Journey,
Hmm.
a song like Bye Bye Blackbird is very different to Blue Turning Gray Over You. And
Right.
and it has to come down to the arrangers who kind of went, and some of the arrangers never met Ringo. Like Richard Perry arranged a track on that album. He never met Ringo until 71 when he was working on Harry Nilsson's album, 72, 71, working with Harry Nilsson. So here he is in LA putting together a backing track, sending it off to London, and George Martin did his magic. But you got Paul McCartney arranging Stardust, which
I know.
I still think it was great that McCartney thought he should call the album Stardust.
McCartney played what?
McCartney said that Ringo should call Sentimental Journey Stardust,
Okay.
the two R's.
That's makes sense. That I think it's clever.
I do too. I'm up.
But you know what I find really interesting about this whole idea of different arrangers, I wouldn't normally think, hey, here's Maurice Gibb or Morris Gibb. He's arranging one song here. Paul's arranging this. Klaus Vormann is arranging a track. Do they have that skill set? You think of Maurice Gibb and the Bee Gees and Klaus Vormann playing bass and everything, but to arrange like a score with a band, that's something entirely different. So that might have been new for them. I don't know.
I think that goes back to my point, kind of experimental, because I think you're right. I think for all of them, with the exception of the people like Les Reed who have done it before, and Chico Farrell and all that, but McCartney, I guess he had some experience with the, Thingamy Bob single and maybe with Mary Hopkin a little bit. He worked closely with Richard Houston, but Morris Gibb, I mean, the Bee Gees at that time were just doing straight Beatlesque pop, really, in 69, 70. And Klaus Vormann, I mean, he was coming out of Manfred Mann. So yeah, I agree. I think that leans towards the more, and that's why I keep thinking it's more experimental than we think it is. Like it's an interesting album, and it was planned. I don't think it was entirely. I think if he'd done the album and it just sounded horrible, it would never have come out. I think for sure George Martin would have said, "This isn't working, Ringo. We need like it don't come easy." It Don't Come Easy was recorded several times before everyone was happy with it to come out. And I think the same thing with George Martin. I think George Martin would definitely not put his name to anything that he thought was subpar.
Right.
But
Yeah. Could you just say whatever you do know beyond what's in the book? Speaking of Morris Gibb, you did say that Ringo and Morris or Maurice, which do you prefer? I've always heard Maurice, but I've
I
heard
always
Morris.
said Maurice. I've always said Maurice Gibb, but then I've heard some people say Morris. It's like I have a friend of mine who's from Ottawa, and his name's Bernard. But every time someone from England says it's like Bernard, and you're like, okay, I don't know. I'll go with Maurice. Anyways, yeah,
It should be however they pronounced it.
yes. I don't know how he pronounced it. I have to go and listen to an interview, I guess.
Okay. Well, you say that Ringo and Maurice recorded an electronic and synthesizer album that has yet to see the light of day.
Yes.
Where did you find that out?
I was okay. Well, that came about through a couple of interviews. One actually with Maurice Gibb talked about it in 71. Maurice was married to Lulu.
Right.
Ringo was working with Billy Lowry, who only put out one album, and Ringo co-wrote a song on that album, which is actually a single too. And I got the single as well as the album. And when I also spoke to people, Graham Bonnet, who were recorded with Ringo Records. Graham was a really good is and was a good friend of Maurice, and he talked to me about it. And he heard it. He said Maurice played him tracks off it. It was an instrumental just freak out album synthesizers because I think they were, this was at the beginning with Kraftwerk and Kahn from Germany and um, Ringo liked this. I mean, because what's the first album that Ringo puts out on his record label? A synthesizer album of the Ringo album called Startling Music, right? Ringo was a big fan of the synthesizer, and he made a comment. He goes, "Well, I bought this thing. I might as well use it," So, but that's how I found out about it. And then I think it's mentioned in maybe Altogether Now, maybe one of those books. I've seen it mentioned in a book, and I'm trying to jog my memory, but it's. I would pay money to hear that. Well, I pay money for most things, Kenneth, but I'd pay money for that.
Well, what was electronic sound? I
Well,
mean,
yeah, I
yeah,
mean, but what didn't George work with Krauss and the other
I
names? Yeah.
Bernie. Okay.
So, but there's a lot of stories about Maurice I didn't put in the book because I didn't think it was more. Lulu didn't want him dabbling in partying, so he used to say to Lulu, "I'm going to go over to Ringo's house, Richie's house, and just play some pool." They didn't play pool. They were they were, doing their own form of experimenting, which no doubt led to the album. Maybe I don't know.
Maybe someday it'll come out.
We can hope. I mean, I like the outtakes from Sentimental Journey and Buku Blues to come out. I mean, there's only I think one song from Buku Blues called Wishing Book, which you can hear on YouTube. It's someone's posted it, and I think um,
The
they
Stormy Weather
recorded
from
Stormy Weather and Autumn Leaves,
yeah.
which would have been great B-sides if they put a single out from that album.
Hmm. Hey, I want Ringo's catalog to be remastered and given box sets, but we're having a tough time getting Beatles albums now for that,
Yeah, or Wings.
or more so McCartney.
Yeah, London Town, Back to the Egg. Yeah.
You do believe that the Let It Be album and the McCartney album might have hurt the sales of Sentimental Journey since they all came out at the same time, close in time.
Yeah,
I'm,
I don't think Sentimental Journey hurt their sales.
oh no, I don't think so. No, McCartney and Let It Be both did really well.
Yes, they did.
Um, Let me just bring up this is the start here of the side projects, working with Howlin' Wolf. I Ain't Superstitious. This is drumming for Howlin' Wolf, the beginning of Ringo's solo career. And like I said, a whole bunch of other artists listed here in this book, but it's just Ringo willing to help out who he wants to or people that he admires.
Well, there was Howlin' Wolf and BB King at the very beginning.
Got to
But
get to that. Yeah.
think about this too. In 1970, Ringo puts out two albums. He plays on Let It Be, three now, Plastic Ono Band, Plastic Ono Band, All Things Must Pass. He was on six albums that charted.
Hmm.
Uh, five of them made top 10. But he was, and then you look at 71, he was working with Howlin' Wolf, BB King, Harry Nilsson. It's fascinating to see how much work that guy did.
Oh, I know. And it's all throughout the 70s, like I said. Um, One thing I found interesting here, although it's like two conflicting stories about Buku's of Blues, according to Sorrell's Pickard, it was Chuck Howard, who wrote four songs on the album, Buku's of Blues, that convinced Ringo to come to Nashville to record, not Pete Drake.
So I put both of those stories in because I thought it was important to kind of say, well, Pete Drake there's that one version of the story of Ringo picking him up at the airport with his collection of country cassettes.
Uh-huh.
This other version where this person says, well, I actually, I mean, I think it's probably Pete Drake because Pete Drake was a well-known producer. Well, Harrison picked him to be on All Things Must Pass. The guy was clearly talented, and when you read about how the album was recorded, and it was almost like a shift work. Ringo would go in at certain, and they would record X amount of songs, and then they'd break X amount of songs. So I think sometimes in a book, I think it's important to kind of give both sides because someone might say, well, what about this guy said this? And really, it's up to I don't know the truth or whatever, but I think it was Pete Drake. But maybe Sorrel Pickard had something to do with it too. I don't know. I mean, it's possible.
Hmm. Another thing, well, this is something you pick up throughout your entire book is that Ringo likes to work quickly.
Yes.
Um, a lot of his albums he recorded, I mean, Ringo took like 6 months, which was a long time, but a
Yeah.
lot of the other albums were done like, what, a month, many of them.
Ringo the Fourth was recorded, the basic tracks and everything was done in 2 weeks, and then it was another week of overdubs. So it was about 3 weeks. You're right, about a month or less. Bad Boy the same. Bad Boy was recorded very quickly. Even Goodnight Vienna. That was when I spoke to the engineer, Bill Schnee, and maybe not pronouncing his name, he said Ringo worked very quickly. I mean, they did a lot of pre-production work so that when it came time to push the buttons, but Lennon, I mean, what surprised me more than anything was the role that John Lennon played on the Goodnight Vienna album. I mean, he clearly directed a lot of sessions. He could have actually gotten a co-producer credit for Only You and Goodnight Vienna and the reprise. He could have. But Lennon was very active during that album, and I think he was just trying to help Ringo, and he was in LA anyways, so. Because that was an incredible year for Lennon, if you think about it, right? Like Lennon was working with Bowie and Elton John and Ringo and Harry Nilsson, and he gave a song to Johnny Winter, and he worked kind of on the Keith Moon album, and he was just
Mm.
everywhere. And then so it makes sense that Ringo was kind of part of that scene, and I don't think Goodnight Vienna falters for the quickness of the recording, but he did work quickly. Yes, I've heard that from people who, when I spoke to Lon and Derek Van Eaton, for example, they both said, Ringo would basically just do it. David Spinoza was very kind and talked to me at great length about the Ringo the Fourth album. Great stories. And
Mhm.
my favorite, can I just digress for a sec?
Sure.
When I said to David Spinoza, I complimented him on his guitar solo for the song Wings. And he said, "Oh no, I didn't play on that song." I said, "Well, who played guitar on it?" He goes, "I don't know, Aaron, it wasn't me." And I said, "But it was recorded in New York." And he was just a minute. He goes into his journal and goes, "No, no, it was me. Yeah, that was." He hadn't
No,
heard the song for a while, I guess.
it, it's a great thing to be a session player because you work with so many people and you're on a lot of records. It's another thing to remember it all. Because when
That's
you're
yeah.
that busy every day, sometimes doing two, three sessions, you can't remember everything you've done.
Listen, I can't remember what I had for lunch 2 days ago. So if you ask me who I recorded with in 1974
Yeah.
or 77, uh,
In
but
fact, a dose of rock and roll, we've always said that's Peter Frampton on lead guitar. Sure, it sounds like Peter Frampton, but even when you ask Peter Frampton, he's not sure.
yeah,
He doesn't seem to remember that he played on it.
yeah,
So,
cool,
but
eh? I mean, it's incredible.
yeah.
I mean, it's if it's not Peter Frampton, it's his evil twin because it's got that Peter Frampton sound. The minute you, even as a kid, when I bought that single, my brother had all of the Frampton's albums, and it was like, oh yeah, that's Peter Frampton for sure. There was no mistake in that. Wow, wow, wow.
Uh-huh. Since you mentioned Goodnight Vienna, and we're going to bounce around a bit here, but
Yeah.
and I know you feel the same way as you've indicated in the book. Snookeroo to me is one of the best songs Ringo's ever done.
Thank you.
It's
Yes.
so energetic. I don't understand why that song wasn't an A-side to be a hit. And look, never knock a hit record. Only You did well. It went to number 6 in the United States. And oh, by the way, thank you to all the Canadians who are listening, because when you look at all the charts here, Ringo did very well in Canada.
He did.
I'm looking because that's another thing you do here is you'll say where the singles and albums charted in the U.S., in Canada, in the UK. You go into a lot of foreign countries when you get to Ringo's Polydor stuff. But I can't for the life of me understand why Snookeroo wasn't made into a major hit record, considering the fact that Elton John was the hottest thing on the planet.
Yeah.
You know, John Lennon had success with Whatever Gets You Through the Night at the time with Elton John. I sometimes wonder if maybe there was a feeling of you don't want to rely too much on who's hot at the moment. But that was so tailor-made for Ringo, Snookeroo.
Taylor made Elton John has never recorded a version of it. It was literally written for Ringo.
Yep.
And I agree with you. I mean, it would be like if Taylor Swift worked with I don't know, some artist who's Bruno Mars, and
Uh-huh.
and it doesn't sell, you'd be going, well, Bruno Mars was big, and Taylor Swift is, huge, and why didn't this? And it's a good song. Like it's not like it's like just a throwaway by Elton. It's not in the least. It's beautifully produced, um, vaguely autobiographical. I mean, Ringo didn't have a sister, obviously, but I mean, it's like it's got that kind of northern, and Elton John said, he wanted to write a Northern England song, and he did it. I think he succeeded. It's a great song. Should have been an A side in America. It didn't do well as an A side in the UK. It just and no, and it was that's a head scratcher.
It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, the whole
No.
world loved Elton John at that time, you know. And there's an Elton demo of it. That's the only thing
Yes,
that I
there is a,
know.
a demo. Yes,
That's
there
on
is.
the Caribou, I think, the remaster.
Um,
It's on there.
I think so. I was just watching Elton John. We just got the Captain Fantastic in 5.1.
Ooh,
Digressing for a second, but that sounds quite incredible, by the way, in 5.1. Really good. And it's got Lucy in the Sky, One Day at a Time, and yeah, it's got those two songs on it, featuring John. So that's kind of nice.
right. Actually, Chip Mattinger had said, because for years I had read that John Lennon played on One Day at a Time, but he didn't. But
No, I
that was,
thought he did too.
well, Chip is saying otherwise based on
No.
his research. But
But he
anyway,
was on he was on Lucy, right? Lucy in the Sky
oh,
Diamonds.
definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. That was such an incredible time having hits with Elton John and David Bowie. So
Oh,
maybe wish that
and
John would work more with those two. Would have.
yeah, me too. Especially Bowie, because Fade was such a, again, out there song that I'm not sure RCA probably went, this was a hit, but it was a great song.
Hmm. Okay. Bukusa Blues. I sometimes wonder because over the years, people, up until Look Up recently, people have been saying, why don't you make another country album? He's so suitable for that. He showed it in the Beatles with Back Naturally and Don't Pass Me By and all that. And he's right at home on these songs. And these songs, for the most part, they were all written for Ringo, or were they songs that were lying around by some of these songwriters that they just gave to Ringo? Do you know?
Yeah, they were kind of column A and column B. I think some are written just for Ringo.
Uh-huh.
Uh, of course, got the published ones, and it was a great chance for artists to. I mean, Jerry Reed wasn't even big at the time. He certainly was big afterwards, but
Yeah.
they were written some specifically for Ringo, and there's a couple of songs that were lying around for 20 years that suited the album. So,
Uh-huh. Yeah. Um, I just I don't understand why Ringo never went back to that, especially when, he's been given a lot of credit for coming up with that album. And in fact, I heard that people in the country field at that time when Bukuza Blues came out were very much aware of Ringo's album.
I have a I have a DVD of Neil Young being interviewed in Nashville when Harvest came out, and one of the interviewers actually talks about Buku Blues. So they were very aware of it.
Uh-huh.
And Ringo, I mean, Ryan, Photograph Viewer,
Excellent song.
Sunshine, which is kind of country folk. And Ringo talks about going back to doing a country album. In '76, he says in a couple of interviews, he really wants to do another country album. I wonder if it was, I think he got stuck in there. I got to do a rock album. And,
Yeah.
but certainly in the '80s, that would have been the time for him to do a country album. Would have been awesome. I know he tried. I know there was the failed attempt, but I think if he'd had the right producer, the right material, um, but even that album had Bob Dylan on it, so I don't know. But it's a mystery again that he waited so long to do another country album. But he certainly had his fingers in country. He worked with Guthrie Thomas,
Right.
um, and Friedman, as I'd mentioned, who was kind of a country artist. Of trouble here. Oh, please Siri. Again. Got Siri yelling at me now. Um, you know, he did the voice of the good Lord Jesus on the Kinky Friedman album. I can't put it any other way.
Uh,
Uh, and how
the
we met Kinky Friedman, I thought was really cool.
song, I just want to let them know. It's called Men's Room in LA by Kinky Friedman. Go to YouTube or Spotify, see if it's on Spotify. Check it out. Ringo is the voice of Jesus. Sounds just like him too. Now
Could
there's a
be.
project for you.
Do you know
But
the sad thing is that I had scheduled to interview Kinky Friedman, and it was just before he passed away, and I kept getting messages saying he's not really feeling well today. Can we do it tomorrow? And unfortunately, it never happened because I really would have loved to have spoken to Kinky Friedman. I think that would have been because I tried to talk to people who like no one's ever spoken to Manhattan Transfer. Ringo drums on tracks on their album.
that's right.
And I was lucky to track down one member to talk to me about it. And it seemed important to kind of get a sense of how Ringo worked with these artists, right?
Hmm. Yeah. Carly Simon you have in here.
Oh, yeah.
Webb. You know, the thing is, Jimmy Webb, he made the album Land's End with Ringo playing on it, but I didn't realize until I'm watching the Ognerette special that Jimmy Webb is part of it. It's like, I didn't know he was in there too.
Yeah. It's again, and it's funny to see that, he's coming to Toronto. I might try to, I mean, I know the book's out, but I could also clean up the book a bit. Maybe I'll try to get a conversation with him and add it for a second edition.
You want to listen to, I did an interview with Jimmy Webb, which I'm very
Oh,
proud. It's not on my YouTube channel, it's on my website. It's strictly an audio.
okay.
Because he had a book, his own autobiography, Cake in the Rain. It's well over 5 years ago, but it was really a Beatles slanted interview. And there's a lot of stories in there of his experiences with each of
Oh,
the Beatles. And he was very close, as you say in your book, with Ringo, especially. But helping John not go to jail after the Smothers Brothers incident and all this, he was there during that whole time.
I got to hear that.
Definitely one of our greatest songwriters.
Still is.
Yep.
Still is. I mean, but and performers. I mean, I think he doesn't get enough credit for his own music. Like when he sings his stuff, it's good.
I
He's
I actually really like his voice a lot, his singing voice.
he's like Chris Christopherson. People will say, "Oh, Chris Christopherson can sing." I disagree. I like Chris, and I love Jimmy Webb stuff too. So I'm gonna
Uh-huh.
listen to that. I'm sorry I missed it. I'd like to listen to that.
I'll send you the link.
Please
Yeah.
do,
It's
please.
really, there's a certain story which I'm not going to tell you in detail here about a problem he had with Paul. And I'll just let you know that he asked Jimmy to write a song for Mary Hopkins' postcard album, which he didn't do. But check it out.
Was Paul not happy about it? Oh, okay, I'll leave it. I'll leave it.
No, 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 no. But it's really I'm very proud of that interview because I'd like to do more interviews with people who are songwriters
Yeah.
at their take of how they feel about the Beatles as songwriters, group and solo, if they were influenced by them. And Jimmy is, one of those people that I've interviewed for that. And I hope to do more interviews just like that. Um, Tell me what you know about, and you talk about it a lot in the book about Mark Bolan and becoming friends with Mark Bolan and getting to produce Born to Boogie.
Yeah, I mean, I think Ringo had his finger on the pulse. I mean, I don't, I just heard an interview yesterday, which I somehow missed, where he talked about punk. And it was the only time I've ever heard Ringo talk about punk rock, which was really interesting.
Uh-huh.
But he met Mark, and I mean, Mark Bolan goes back to this Apple days, right? I mean, it's kind of, there's always this kind of connections. And I could see how they would kind of click, two of them, because Mark Bolan's kind of, wacky and funny and out there. And I'm not sure. I think Ringo made the proposal about him doing the film for Mark. And the film is it's a weird film. For those of you who have not seen it, Born to Boogie, there is the concert sequence, which was expertly filmed, in my opinion. But there's, the studio with Elton John, and here he is again on piano, and the what they call the Mad Hatter scenes, where Ringo and Mark are out kind of in a field and trying to get some lines out, and they're finding it all too funny, which I understand. But a lot of people think Mark plays on Back Off Boogaloo, given the title and given the fact that he influenced Ringo. Mark's not on that record. He is on the Ringo album, but he's
Right.
not on Back Off Boogaloo. So, but
Yeah.
great film, Born to Boogie. Again, underrated.
And oh, in fact, you had said I wasn't even aware of this, that the jams there, really jams, with Elton John and Ringo. It's Tutti Frutti that they do,
Yeah.
and Children of the Revolution. That was released as a single somewhere, was it?
Yeah, it was released as a single when they put out the DVD, and it's kind of hard to find now. It didn't do extremely well, but it's a good version. It should have done well, given Mark Bolan's popularity in the UK. It just kind of was poor distribution, I think. But yeah, when they put the movie out on DVD, Born to Boogie, it came out with a single to promote it, and I believe they even had theatrical releases in the UK for the film. But it's funny. I didn't put this in the book, but the first time I saw it was in a theater in Toronto because we used to have these rock movies show at midnight and on Friday nights and Saturday nights, and I had a brother who used to look after me on some weekends who had no boundaries. So there was no problem taking a 10-year-old to a midnight show.
Uh,
I mean, in hindsight, he should have not been doing that, but I got to see a lot of good movies, Yes songs and Pink Floyd and Pompeii and all that. So
Wish I had a brother that took me to those movies. I like Rocky Horror much later than when it came out. So yeah,
yeah.
late.
Well, again, Rocky Horror I bring up in the book because Son of Dracula was such a flop, and yet it was actually predates Rocky Horror. Not that they're the same because they're not, but they are kind of in the sense of kind of takeoff on. I mean, Son of Dracula is more of a takeoff on Hammer horror films than it is the RKO classic American B movie horror films. But anyways, I digress.
Yeah, but that's fine. What was the problem with Son of Dracula and why there wasn't a distribution deal for a long time? And
It just wasn't working. Every time Ringo would show it to people, that it's just not. It wasn't really making a whole lot of sense. He brought in Graham Chapman from Monty Python to try to fix it up. He said it made it worse. Uh, I think RCA was very eager to get the film out because Harry Nilsson was extremely popular in '72. And it was a question of finding a distributor for the Apple film. And a lot of people, when they would screen it, would go, I don't know, man, like this is it's got big stars in it, but how are we going to market this? And it didn't come out for 2 years. And when it came out, Ringo makes a joke about everyone came to the world premiere, then no one else went to see it. And I had always wondered why this film kind of hasn't been available on VHS or DVD or whatever. And I was doing some digging around in Variety, and the film distributor, the distributor of the film, went bankrupt. And if you read the article in Variety, it's like these films are for sale. Whoever wants to buy them will put them out. No one bought it, including Ringo. And so it kind of has gone into limbo. I don't think anyone owns it. I think it's just kind of Ringo has said several times he has no intention of buying it and putting it out. I think he's embarrassed by it. I don't know why, because it's what it is. You get to see Harry Nilsson sing without you. That alone is worth the money, in my opinion. But and Ringo as Merlin. It's great.
it's I often talk about this in my podcast. It's one thing we think as fans instead of how the artist might feel. Because
True.
I happen to feel, and I never said this in my younger years, but I think everything the Beatles have ever done should come out.
I,
It's good or bad because historically, it's the most important band of all time. That doesn't mean they feel that way. Here you got a movie with Ringo and Harry Nilsson in it. Just because of those two names alone, it should be preserved, but that doesn't mean Ringo feels that way.
no, I'm sure he doesn't. And that's a good point you raise. And of course, when I talk to artists, I've a good friend who's a musician, and I'll say, well, I was at that concert, man. Why didn't you put that out? He'll go, Aaron, it just wasn't good. I'll tell you. And in his head, like we didn't play this well. Martha didn't sound good in this song, and it just didn't. And I'm like, yeah, but it's you, and it's great, and I as a fan would love it. But again, you mentioned Canada earlier on. Canada embraced Son of Dracula out in the West Coast for about 2 weeks. A lot of
Uh-huh.
radio stations were promoting it, and it's funny thing. It just didn't do well. I mean, Ringo's film career. I was fortunate to speak to Ray Connolly, and he goes, Ringo was so good, and that'll be the day. He
Right.
could have had a solid career in films, but he chose Listomania and Sextet, and which were not good films. No offense to Ringo. I mean, but again, they're at least they're available if you want to see them. I have the DVD of both of those films, and Blind Man you can kind of find if you kind of in a semi-legal DVD setting. That's a weird movie, Blind Man, put up by Alan Klein, Apco.
Yeah.
But he could have been a good. I mean, That'll Be the Day is a great film, and Ringo steals the movie from David Essex, no question. And he should have done the follow-up, Stardust. I wish he did. I wish he had.
So do you know, were there offers that Ringo was made for other films that he turned down? Were
Yeah,
these just, poor choices that he made later on?
I think that Ringo. I think he wasn't offered a lot, and everything he was offered tended to be comedic. Um, so I think he turned down a lot of comedies because he felt he wanted to do different kinds of films, which is why he did Blind Man, which is different.
Hmm.
But unfortunately, the films he did pick weren't hits. Listomania was not a hit. I mean, Rick Wakeman's in it, Roger Daltrey, Ringo Starr, and then you got Sextet, which Ringo was asked to be in the film, and he just did it. I, 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 I saw that he was offered films with Graham Chapman, Steve Martin. He just, for whatever reason, it maybe didn't fit his schedule. I don't know, but he would have done well. I think maybe, and you know what? It could be that people didn't see him as an actor. It could be that other film producers didn't see it in what Ray Connolly saw, and
Hmm.
it didn't do well. That'll Be the Day it didn't do well in America. It was had kind of not great distribution. Another one I saw, thanks to my brother Ian. Ian, if you're listening, thank you. Uh, he took me to see that, which, I think I was 10 when I saw that for the first time. And when Ringo got beaten up, I was pretty upset. Because that was really Ringo. They didn't use the stunt double. And it was like Ray Conley said, we were terrified. We thought we're going to just be sued forever because Ringo's going to get hurt. And he didn't get hurt, thankfully. But that was Ringo. He did his own stunts.
The Magic Christian did well.
I love the Magic Christian. Yeah,
Uh,
it did well. That's a classic. I mean, it's a great. Again, Ringo was very good in that. Very understated.
mhm.
Uh, he plays off Peter Sellers, pardon the pun, magically. Um, it's a great film, Magic Christian. Yeah, and I mean, he could have had a great acting career. And then the '80s, kind of Princess Daisy and all that kind of stuff. It just
He had Caveman, and if he didn't really want to be known for the comedy, or he wanted to show us some versatility, Caveman's, well, you are taking on a different role by not having English in there. But you know, a lot of people love Caveman, and I enjoy it, but I don't know if it helped his movie career.
no, but but it did well. I mean, it helped his career in the sense that it was a hit. It wasn't a flop. And I actually, so happy when the soundtrack came out because he's in the one scene where he's doing the chant, which is on the album. I get a bit crazy when it comes to get everything. So at least I got that now on a nice CD. I
Yeah,
tell
I
you,
get.
I was just gonna say in the '80s, trying to find all the Ringo Starr cassettes from England of Thomas the Tank Engine was a real challenge here because this is pre-internet and you had to rely on some store importing them, and they weren't about to import just one. They're like, no, but I got them all. So, and I had to pretend I had a kid. No, it's for my son, really.
Or you try to go through Beatle collectors who collect everything on video cassette, and
Yeah, yeah. I just wanted the Thomas the Tank Engine on cassettes because it's the audio cassettes because there's a whole whack of them in England, so I got them all. Maybe in my next book, I'll catalog them all.
let's talk a little bit about the song for which the title of your book comes. It Don't Come Easy. I mean, there's been some controversy through the years about how much of it was written by Ringo and how much was written by George. And all this time, it was always credited as having been written by Richard Starkey. And what are your feelings about it? Because I know what Ringo said, because basically his song that George helped him out a bit.
I think Ringo says, I don't know if it was that song he was talking about or another one where he wrote, he goes, I'm great at starting songs. I'm not great at finishing them.
Right.
I don't know if that was in reference to that song or not, but there's no question that George helped him with the
Yeah.
song. Like, I don't think but I think George was such a good friend to Ringo at that time that it was be like, well, just you have the credit. I mean, look at watch the Let It Be film or the Get the
Octopus Garden.
right
Yeah.
with Octopus's Garden, and George is kind of no, do this. I think George contributed a great deal to the song. I don't think he wrote a whole lot for early 1970. I think that's pure Ringo, um, as is Blind Man, which I think is one of the most underrated songs of all time. But
Well, let's make sure we get to that. I'm curious to why you feel that way.
okay, okay.
But it don't come easy right now.
No, but I think George contributed a great deal to Don't Come Easy. Um, I've often, I mean, George, it's a George Harrison track. I mean, in my head, when I've ever heard it, it sounds there's parts where you go, that's Harrison, right?
Mhm.
Um, but it's also pure Ringo. So it's a great. It makes me really sad that there wasn't a Harrison Starkey like there was a Lennon and McCartney, because I
Mhm.
think the two of them, Photograph, Back Off Boogaloo, It Don't Come Easy, are just are all classics. And I think the two of them, when they wrote together, they just had something. George knew Ringo, and he knew he could play on his strengths, right? So
Right. Well,
brilliant.
John Paul knew that too.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
I've heard Ringo say that George wrote a verse and the bridge, which is
Yes.
a significant part of the song.
Yes.
Plus, he played guitar, plus, he produced it.
There's that.
And when I hear the introduction to It Don't Come Easy, it sounds a lot like what you hear in the middle of Badge,
Oh,
with the
yeah.
playing.
Hot.
So, it's a significant part of the song, but in terms of lyrics and melody, Ringo still wrote probably most of it with a decent amount of help from George. I don't want to give percentages here because how do you even know what to say about it? But I still think if that's what Ringo said, I'd go with him.
And the devil's advocate part of me goes, and Ringo contributed lyrics to Badge without credit. So there you go, right?
Yeah, but it was just one line, and
Oh, come on.
it counts. But
I just no, I'm just kidding. I think we have to go with what Ringo said. I think George would be very upset if it got changed to a Harrison Stark composition. George knew what he was doing. I don't think George was that giving, and when I interviewed people about in my Dark Horse book about when they recorded for Dark Horse, it was the same where George would do a lot of stuff on the records he didn't get any credit for. He didn't want credit. He just wanted to make a good album, and I think he just wanted to help Ringo. They recorded the song several times and finally got it right. And boy, did they get it right. I mean, it's a great song. It's a rock and roll classic.
see, I would love to hear the early versions of that.
Me
And
too.
Stills was on it, and
Yep. I would love to hear that. That would be pretty awesome. Ringo, if you're listening, if you want to hire me, I'm retired from my day job, so I can more than happy look after your archives. So put a plug in.
me too, Ringo. There's a lot of people I know that are willing to help you if you need. Um, and by the same token, Photograph. I've never seen Ringo break it down. What did he write? What did George write? So I'm thinking the very simple part chord wise, like the verses are more Ringo,
Yeah.
but like the middle part, now you're expecting me to live without you, more like a bridge. That's probably George, but I don't know. And unless Ringo actually tells you, I haven't seen it in any interview that Ringo gave.
No, I was even surprised to find out when they wrote it. Like for some reason I never knew they wrote it in 71 on this boat.
Hmm.
Um, and then Richard Perry, when they brought the song to Richard Perry, Richard felt that it was really too slow to dirge like, so he wanted to kind of make a kind of a Phil Spector production.
Yep.
Well, so, and he succeeded. Um, but I would agree with you. I think when I listen to the song and I listen to what Ringo writes, I think although I think the intro is very George, that do-do-dum, do-do-do. I think to me that George kind of contributed the intro, and then Ringo comes in with the first verse. Um, but I think the flip side, Down and Out, even though George produced it, I think that's pure Ringo, you know?
Oh yeah, definitely.
That's pure Ringo.
Yeah.
Looked at the fire, what did I see? I saw someone looking at me. It's great. I love that song.
So I don't forget, why do you like the song Blind Man so much?
Because it again, Ringo was ahead of the curve. I mean, he was doing drone rock and roll 20 years before alternative bands were doing it in the 90s. I mean, I was talking to a musician, and he said, who does kind of the droney music, and he said Eno was listening to that because that song is so, there's no real chorus. It's very loosely structured, and yet it's structured. And I love the lyrics, but I just think it's one of those songs that again you didn't expect to come from Ringo Starr, and you got Klaus Vormann producing it, and it just sounds sonically very different than anything Ringo ever did, certainly up to that point. And as an adult, I liked it more than as I did as a kid. I remember as a kid thinking this is a bit too weird, but in the last 30 years, it's become almost like it's like this is a really underrated song. And it's funny when you play it for people and you say, well, what year do you think this came out? No one will say 72. I always get, oh, it's 90s, right? No, 72. No, it can't be. Yeah, it is. And
Interesting.
why they didn't use it for the film is anyone's guess.
I was going to ask you that. It only made sense to put it in the film.
With Ringo in the film, I think that kind of ended Ringo's involvement with that actor, director, production company. I think it also, I wondered sometimes, given the timing and the fact that John, George, and Ringo were leaving ABCO in 73, this is 72. I'm sure Klein saw the writing on the wall. So he probably just kind of stuck it to Ringo by saying, we're not using that song, Ringo. I'm producing it. No, we're not using it. Um, Shame. But then again, it's still there for people who want to hear it. It's a great track, Blind Man. So
Yeah. Okay. And talking about the Ringo album, he's had, a lot of success with the cover versions, Only You, and of course, You're 16. Whose idea was it to cover You're 16?
that
Because
was
ideal for him. Yeah.
Richard Perry.
Uh-huh.
Ringo said in an interview, and Richard Perry says in his book, that was 100% Richard Perry encouraging Ringo to take on the oldie. And he kind of gave Ringo a choice of two or three songs that he felt suited Ringo's vocals. And one of them was You're 16, You're Beautiful, You're Mine. And smart move, because that was a huge, huge hit. And it suited Ringo, his voice. And again, Richard Perry knows how to produce or knew how to produce. And he
Hmm.
got great sound on that single. And the other thing is Paul McCartney doing a pretend sax solo. So,
Right.
which we all thought was a kazoo, but it wasn't. It's just McCartney trying to sound like a saxophone.
Hey, it worked for that song. It really did. I mean,
Perfectly.
great cover. You're 16 is such a great cover.
Oh, fantastic. And actually, it's one of those rare times that it became more a Ringo song than the original version. I think people, when they hear You're 16, they think of Ringo, not, Johnny Burnett. I could be wrong, but I mean, I'll hear Ringo's version on the radio on the oldie stations before I hear Johnny Burnett's anymore in 2026. It just seems to be a bit more played when it's played.
Okay.
I could be wrong. I mean, it's like Twist and Shout, right? I mean, that became a Beatles song more than an Isley Brothers song. So nothing against the Isley Brothers. I love it. Just
Hey, there are Beatles fans out there that automatically love the Beatles covers more than the originals.
yeah.
In most cases, I feel that way, but I love the originals too.
Oh, 100%. Because, maybe not Ain't She Sweet, but yeah. Although,
I
you
love
never
all
know.
the Buddy Holly versions of his own music and Chuck Berry's versions, and uh, you
Yeah, I
know,
mean, even Carl Perkins.
yeah.
Again, the country influence coming through the Carl Perkins songs, Honey Don't, Matchbox, Everybody's Tried to Be My Baby. Um, the Beatles really made it their own, to
Mhm.
me. And Ringo's cover versions, Only You, but even songs that you might not know the original, like Lipstick Traces on a Cigarette. Um, it's fantastic what Ringo did. I think I said in my book, the only one that I don't think worked for Ringo was Where Did Our Love Go? Leave that for Soft Cell.
You sound just like me, Aaron. That's a problem. And you're repeating some of the same things that I've been saying. I think that's probably the worst cover he ever did. Well,
Yeah.
actually, what was the one where he used the auto tune a few of his albums back? Oh, Money.
Oh,
I wasn't
yes.
about that version.
Yeah, that was weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what he was thinking there.
No, I
Uh,
love what he did with like everything. Sneaking Sally Through the Alley. I love that cover. Um, Heart on My Sleeve was really a cover, and that's one of my
oh,
favorite Ringo songs. She's About a Mover. I love that version.
oh, I also think his version of hmm, Drowning in the Sea of Love,
Yeah,
which incorporates, to my ears, I was thought it sounded initially like the Golden Earring song. The bong bong bong. And I'm like, okay, well, this is going somewhere. I don't know where, but
I didn't think about that till you put it in your book. Now every time I hear it, I'm gonna be thinking that.
it's true.
I also wish I knew more about You and Me, Babe, which is a great song to end
Yeah,
the Ringo album. And, how much of it was written by Mal Evans, how much was written by George Harrison. And you do include in there what Ken Womack wrote
yeah,
in his book about Mal Evans starting to write that song when they went to India with a
yeah.
different. So, but I still wish I knew how much was George and how much was Mal.
I, George, I think sometimes is like a song doctor. It's like he gets a portion of a song and then finishes it. And I think because when you listen to it, can you pinpoint like you did with okay with It Don't Come Easy, you go, this part's definitely George. With You and Me, Babe, I don't really know. Doesn't sound like a George Harrison song in my mind, but
Because I don't really know Mal's style of songwriting. There aren't
oh,
enough
that's a
songs to
good
me
point.
where I can say, yeah, that's definitely Mal. That's the thing. But the one thing that George has done several times, he does this descending pattern and then ascending pattern, usually on guitar or piano, like You Like Me Too Much. Dun, 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 dun,
Yeah,
dun, 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 dun. On I Dig Love, he does that. Dun, 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 dun. And then on You and Me, Babe, you've got the same
yeah,
kind of dun, 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 that kind of thing. That to me is George.
yeah.
But still,
Good
Mal
call.
could be a significant part of the song, and we just don't know.
It's hard to say, right? I mean, Mal's not around, nor is George, and it's hard to know what's what. It's a pity that you know sometimes my wife's just bringing me my power cord because my laptop is going to die on me. Thank you. So you were talking earlier about some artists will say, well, yeah, I understand that you want this to come out, but it's not significant. I don't think they've really documented recording sessions all that well and songwriting and that we to the degree that we need it now. I think nowadays they do. Like you get an album and you know who did what and when and all that. But 73, I think in many regards, Ringo was just another album. And but that was a weird year, right? Because you had Retro Speedway #1, a Material World was to #1, the Red and the Blue albums hit one
Uh-huh.
and three. And then Ringo peaked at two on Billboard, one in Canada,
Number
uh,
one.
#1 in Canada,
Thank
and
you, Ken.
one on Cashbox. But I don't know that they thought it. So I agree with you. I wish I knew more about who did. Like I don't even know Vinnie Ponce and Ringo Starr's writing style together. Like I would love to know, and that's why I wanted to talk to Vinnie. But unfortunately, I could not locate him. But I'd love to know about Oh My or Out on the Street. Like, there's so many songs they wrote together, and he produced the Bad Boy album. But I don't know how they work together. And I asked, you know, her name just went out of my head, and she didn't know either. I mean, Ringo's fiance, Nancy Andrews,
Oh,
and she
Nancy.
said they just worked together, Aaron. They just kind of started with nothing and came up with a song. Oh, great. How?
I know. Ringo years ago said the quote that you mentioned, I'm good at starting songs, I need help finishing them. So you
Yeah,
have to figure that songs that have his name on them, he's written most of it and needed help finishing it. Although, in talking to Gary Burr, he said that Ringo is very generous at giving people songwriting credit. If you write one line in a song, he puts your name in there. There could be times when Ringo wrote a line in a song and that was it, and maybe he got a credit. So there's no formula there. But
no.
since Ringo and Vinny wrote more songs together than, well, aside from the Mark Hudson team, he's that important. in the Ringo story. And I wish, yeah, he's among like my top five of people I'd love to interview, and I've tried. So,
I mean, Ringo the Fourth, six out of the 10 songs are written by those two. And I try to go, I try to express the book, and maybe I'm completely wrong. And if I am, I'm open to the criticism or feedback. But to me, an album like Ringo the Fourth, it's as personal to Ringo as Desire or Blood on the Tracks was to Dylan. And I think that maybe it gets glossed over by the production and it's quote unquote the disco album, which by the way, all my research at no time at the time of the album came out does anyone refer to it as a disco record. I just want to put that on the table right now. You're shaking your head. You don't.
oh no, no. This is what I've been saying for years and years. It's not a disco album.
No,
It's
no, it's
not.
not.
There's 10 songs on there. Drowning in the Sea of Love is disco. You might say Simple Love Song has some element of disco. And actually, the B-side, Just a Dream, is more disco. But most of the album is not.
No, it's
So
not.
label that.
It's one of my pet peeves. And I made a joke to my wife. I said, I'm writing this book just so I can put into a book. This is not a disco album. Like I just that's where I started that chapter. I was like, Ringo the Fourth is not a disco album. Stop it. End of story. But how do you not think Just a Dream would have been a hit as an A side? I think it's much more commercial than Wings as the first single off the album.
Yeah.
And Simple Love Song should have been the first single. If you're going to take an album track, Simple Love Song would have been the perfect, hey folks, new Ringo, boom. And I think that would have been a hit. I really do.
You could have had Silly Love Songs in
Yes.
76, a love song in 77.
And
But
Wings.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. But, gosh, I can go in so many directions here. I know that you said that this was like a very personal album for him, Ringo the Fourth, but that at the same time, you said the same thing about Goodnight Vienna,
I
because
did.
it was at the time of his breakup with Maureen. So how do you differentiate between the two? You've got some real melancholy songs, on Goodnight Vienna, like, well, Husbands and Wives, his cover of the Roger Miller song. Um, Easier for Me, very sad song that Harry Nilsson wrote. You got stuff like that, and you got some sad stuff. I mean, Gave It All Up, I got to tell you, is in my probably top five of Ringo solo songs. I really love that song a
Me
lot,
too.
and it's highly underrated. It's a song that it's one of those songs where if you're at a bar and you want to talk about your girlfriend, whoever that you just broke up with, and you're really, melancholy, you lift your mug up and you go, I gave it all up for you. It's perfect for that. I think.
See, I think Good Night Vienna, you mentioned two songs. I'm going to add in there All by Myself, which is, another sad one. To me, I thought Good Night Vienna was the breakup with Maureen. Rotogravure is the starting a relationship with Nancy. I thought Ringo the Fourth, when I say it's personal, I think like that song you mentioned, Gave It All Up, to me, is Ringo reflecting on his life. I think that song, although not, again, 100% autobiographical, there's elements, you can almost feel Liverpool in it. You can almost feel him saying, I had to give this stuff up so I could become this, and then I'm giving it up for, and I think it's a
Right.
very melancholy song, but I think Ringo the Fourth to me was him kind of looking backwards on his life and kind of figuring, this is where I am right now.
Uh,
And I got to figure out where I'm going. And so that's why when I listened to Ringo the Fourth, and because he wrote the majority of the songs with Vinny, I kind of lean towards no, this is kind of a personal album for him. And I think it was an important album because he had never written that much for an album before. And I mean, he wrote songs on Ringo, Good Night Vienna, Ringo Gravure. And I have to agree with you, by the way. That's such an underrated song, and I think Ring of the Fourth is an underrated album. People will put it down, and I'm like, have you listened to it? Like, really listened to it? Because I don't know that you have. That's
a
just
lot
my opinion.
not only rated as Ringo's worst album, but it's like the worst solo Beatle album to a lot of people.
Yeah,
And I think that's ridiculous.
I do
I mean,
too.
in fact, like you said, six of the 10 songs were co-written with Vinnie Poncia, but that alone shows a growth as a songwriter. You know,
100%.
and I think that they worked really well together. The ballads on side two, It's No Secret and Gypsies in Flight are really nice. I like this cover of Sneaking Sally Through the Alley. Um, wasn't too crazy about Out in the Streets, which I think is a favorite of yours. I don't know why, but I like most of that album.
I actually, it was also when I was reading the reviews at the time, the critics in England, every review focused on that song. It was almost as if like this is the best thing that Ringo's done, and it should have been a single. I think one reviewer said, the album is okay, but boy, this one track, Ringo just said, and it's so here's what happened. It made me re-listen. When I wrote the book, I actually went over each album and listened to it and listened to it and listened to it as I wrote. And then I'd read the reviews and then I listened to it again with that in mind. And then I listened to it. I thought, yeah, I hear it. Like I hear this. It's a weirdly structured song. The ending doesn't work. I'm gonna punch your nose and all that. I mean, that's just silly. But it up to that point, it has a pretty cool driving beat to it. And yeah, I think a couple of people have asked me about that. They've said, okay, I'll go along with Ring of the Fourth's a good album, but Aaron. And my answer is, I didn't say Where Did Our Love Go is good. So let's just put that out there. And I didn't praise that one. In fact, I think I said in the book it was better with Soft Cell. And it was, but you know, but it's funny when you read the contemporary reviews of the album.
Uh,
It wasn't. Some reviews were bad. Obviously, nothing's gonna get. Bad Boy got slagged off way more than Ring of the Fourth. Bad Boy, there wasn't one good review about Bad Boy. But Rotogravure, for example, front page of Melody Maker, Jolly Nice Ringo. I mean, yeah, it was well received. And when I spoke to Mike Hales from Polydor,
hmm.
they actually thought when they heard Rotogravure, Polydor literally went, "We've got the biggest album of the year here," and he said, "We don't know what went wrong." And because everything seemed to be doing, Ringo did the films for it, he did press, it just didn't, for some reason, I don't know if it was out of date, I don't know. But uh there you go.
Like I was saying earlier, to me, you think about the way that his music was promoted. I don't think Ringo was totally cooperative when it came to promoting. Like the stuff that he did for Polydor for Europe, he promoted there and gave interviews there, but he gave few, if any, interviews in the United States.
Right, right.
So if you're not touring and you're not giving interviews, how do you expect your record to sell strictly from the promotion of the record label,
Yeah.
the record
I
company?
Point taken. And he wasn't doing the Tonight Show or he wasn't on any of the popular, I mean, there was a ton of variety shows in 76 that he could have definitely gotten on, could have been on American Bandstand if you really want to go down that road. I mean, Pink Floyd did American Bandstand, but there was very few bands in 76 that, what's that?
Could have been on Saturday Night Live.
100%.
Yeah.
Could have done a lot of things, and he didn't. And I think the touring piece you said earlier on, I had to think, I think if he had toured that album, even if he did a show in New York, show in LA, show in Chicago, London, Berlin, it would have pushed it over. Because if you're a DJ back in 76, I'm kind of answering my own question now.
Hmm.
But you got Fleetwood Mac coming to town, or Linda Ronstadt, or Paul McCartney and Wings, or whoever. You're
Hmm.
playing records, you're talking about them. And in between, you got someone like Ringo who's just not touring. And there's when I worked in radio, we used to get these open-end interview albums for everybody. Neil Diamond, Gordon Lightfoot, Anne Murray, Paul McCartney. We never got one for Ringo. Like that would have been a very easy thing to do to send out to radio stations as an open-end interview. Atlantic Records could have put it out, and Ringo could have talked about the album. He didn't. And Ringo the Fourth, he didn't do any press in Europe, and he did very little press for that album. I think only Hey Baby, no, Drowning in the Sea of Love were the only two videos for that album. No, Hey Baby was Rotogravure. Drowning in the Sea of Love was the only film for Ringo the Fourth. And then Bad Boy only did the Tonight, but he did the TV special in North America, which didn't do well.
See,
Although
that's he did the TV special for Rats.
yeah.
I think a tour would have done much better for him than this one TV special.
Okay, so when I spoke to Lon and Derek Van Eaton, they were both under the impression they were going to tour. they thought that was going to kick off a tour. Um, and it didn't. It didn't turn out that way for whatever reason. And Jimmy Webb was the arranger, and he was prepared to go on the road with Ringo. That could have just killed that. That would have been huge if Ringo had toured in '78 with that lineup, because that's a great, because that was actually filmed live. And it would have been killer. That would have been great. Could do a bit of Ringo Bad Boy, bit of Beatles stuff, some
Right.
Ringo. It would have been huge, huge
I,
tour. But
I love that moment in the TV special.
me
You
too.
know,
But so well, it's the best part, isn't it?
yeah, Hard Times he did
Yeah.
live, Heart on My Sleeve, and they work really well as live songs. That would have been a great band to go out with. And
Hard
I love
Times.
our
Hard Times
concept.
sounds better.
What's that?
I think Hard Times sounds better live than it does on the record.
You might be right about that. Yeah, I don't know. So let me ask you this, since we were just talking about some of the reasons why Ringo's records didn't sell. And I'm glad that you go into this in the book because I often wondered why didn't he keep Richard Perry as his producer? And you do kind of, well, you got different stories there about that, about whether Jerry Wexler from Atlantic wanted Arif Mardin to be the producer, or it was pressure from the record company, maybe. Because, you're working in a business where if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Richard Perry has worked his magic with Ringo, and I'm sure he would have loved to continue working with Ringo. But do you think that having a different producer made a very big difference, or was the
Yeah.
quality still there?
So I think the quality was still there, but I think the producer made a big difference. And so there are a couple of different stories, but really, Ringo said in one interview he had signed to Atlantic and Polydor. He wanted to have a fresh start with a new producer. I don't know that Arif Mardin, I probably pronounced his name wrong, but Arif Mardin was the right guy for him.
Hmm.
Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't, because he tried to replicate on Rotogravure. Europe. It's kind of like same vein as Ringo and Goodnight Vienna. But even Nancy Andrews said that Ringo was so out of his element. And David Spinoza said the same thing. Ringo was not comfortable in New York City with people he had never played with. Um, and he was in New York and he was doing Ringo the Fourth, and he just felt he wanted to be with his friends in LA. And Martin was like, no, 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 we're recording in New York. Um, yeah, I think the producer, but Ringo said a couple of times in '75, he just thought he had done everything he could with Richard Perry. Richard Perry writes about that in his book as well. That kind of, know, I don't know, but I do think it made a difference. I agree with you. It's odd. It was odd going to Polydor, and I mean, even the record deal was odd, really, when you think about it.
Hmm.
ABC Records was throwing money at Ringo. He didn't go with them. He went with Polydor and Atlantic in North America. Well, Canada and America. And well, Polydor really pushed the first Ringo album, Rotogravure. And I think they wanted Arif Mardin to produce the album. That's what Mike Hale said that. Felt like he wanted to update Ringo's sound. The other problem was, and you remember that, I think you're around my age.
Hmm.
In '75, 2 years between albums was a long time. I'm sure Pink Floyd, you didn't go 2 years without a brand new album. You just didn't. That wasn't the norm. And when he put out Blasphemy Past, he could have put on a couple of like maybe my man could have been on that. It could have been more down and out or put some, but it was just he just kind of disappeared. He didn't, but he did, if you know what I mean.
Right.
And you're only as
I
good
know
as your
that's hard to believe in this day and age when there are artists who could, I don't know, take 5 years in between albums.
Adele.
But and more.
Yeah.
Stevie Wonder, you could wait
Yeah.
forever for a new album. But
Paul
in those days,
McCartney.
yeah, that's why I said 5 years there, Aaron. But he is going to have a new album this year.
Ringo.
I don't know if you heard, but he said that he's got 25 songs.
Yeah.
So does that mean we're going to get two albums out of it, or one album with 10 different versions from the same album?
I'm hoping two albums.
It'll cost less that way.
Yeah, the fewer arguments I can do.
But I'm often just I find it difficult to understand why the downfall and so quickly with Ringo. And you even mentioned with the Dose of Rock and Roll, which I thought was a really good single. He didn't even make a video for that. And that's your first single from the album. I don't get it. And I also feel that record companies give up on an album if the first single doesn't do as well as they want. So
Oh
maybe
yeah.
that was the case with Ringo's Rotogravure.
Yeah, I think once it didn't do well in America, Atlantic just kind of wiped their hands off it. And in the UK and Europe, now in Europe, the first single was "You Don't Know Me at All,"
Hmm.
which was a minor hit. But England completely ignored "Dose of Rock and Roll," "Hey Baby." I think Polydor kind of went, "Oh, we tried, man, we tried." It was very rapid, and I'm going to maintain this. I think if you put something out in 75, a single, something to keep people interested. I agree with you. Like if he had come out with a Don't Come Easy and was on Saturday Night Live or was on American Bandstand or on the Tonight Show or even heaven forbid Donnie Marie, just go at Smothers Brothers. Go on the Smothers Brothers and do a dose of rock and roll. He was on for No No Song, So I mean, there was ample there was a lot. Don Krishna's rock concert. He could have hosted the night, and he could have, or not, or midnight special. Paul McCartney used to send videos to midnight special all the time. I used to stay up late to watch, Mullif Could Tire or whatever film he was going to send. Lots of opportunities, and I don't know if Atlantic Records just thought, because if you look too, initially out of the box, radio stations jumped all over Dose of Rock and Roll, FM and AM.
Hmm.
But it just kind of lost the wind in the sails went out very quickly. And then I think you're right. I think the record company kind of went, nah, we got a dud here. What are we going to do? And We is very famous for that. They did it with Gon Trapo too. It's like, well, we don't know what we're doing with this album. Just let's forget about it. Pity, but that's what happens.
Well, George didn't promote it at all, so that
Nothing,
didn't help.
nothing, nothing. So
If you
interesting.
listen to Ringo talk about that time, he'll say, well, you can hear it in the music that the music was going downhill. And he's also referring to it at the time when he had alcohol problems.
Yeah.
Oh, um, so I don't know if I agree with Ringo because even if he had those problems, the music still was pretty good. I honestly, and I think a lot of people will disagree with me, but I didn't see that big a difference in the quality between Goodnight Vienna and Ringo's Rotogravure. Or, I think Goodnight Vienna is better produced. I like Richard Perry's production better than Eric Martin's where Ringo is concerned. But and like I said, I love Snookeroo to death. And Goodnight Vienna and Only You. Ooh Wee, I think would have been a really good A-side for
Yeah.
Goodnight. But yeah, but at the way Ringo talks about it, it's all, where his head was at, and he didn't put the effort in as much.
But he contradicts himself because he'll say, I didn't really put much into those albums. Well, yeah, you did. You wrote 6 out of 10 songs, Ringo.
On
So
one,
um,
yeah.
I think sometimes the Beatles, all four of them, uh, Paul does this all the time, and it drives me up the wall, where because it doesn't sell or because it doesn't get the critical acclaim he thinks it deserves, he kind of goes, yeah, well, it wasn't my best album. I kind of, and you're like, no, just be, and I think Ringo does that, where he's kind of going, yeah, I kind of went downhill in the late 70s. And I'm thinking, I don't think you were. And I think he put as much effort in those three albums from Rotogravure to Bad Boy as he did on Ringo and Goodnight Vienna. Unfortunately, and there's other factors at play here. I mean, radio was changing, the way you promoted records was changing. He wasn't touring, he wasn't out there. He was out there for Bad Boy. He did a lot of promotion in America for Bad Boy. But by then it was almost a bit too late. It was kind of I don't know if Lipstick Traces was the first. I wouldn't have chosen Lipstick Traces as the first single off that album personally. I don't think that was the best. I remember reading one review and it said, if Lipstick Traces is the best track off the album, then we're in trouble. And if it's not the best track on the album, why are they putting it out as the first single? It's just like, well, okay, two good questions, right?
What would you have picked?
I personally, I would have gone with Hard Times. I think Hard Times would have done in 78, given the style of music, or truthfully, Tonight. I think Tonight could have been a bigger hit in America than it. I think it was the wrong song in England, or Heart on My Sleeve. One of those three would have been the first. Like Heart on My Sleeve is a commercial song. It's just dripping with like hooks and great lyrics, and Ringo does a great job selling it, and it's as good as Gallagher and Lyle's version, or as good as Brian Ferry's, if not better. And maybe that should have been the first single. It might have done well. It might have been on the MOR charts or the Adult Contemporary or whatever it called at the time. But I don't know that. And I love Lipstick Traces, and I love the B side even more. Old Timer Lovin',
Uh,
Dr. John's organ. Oh my gosh, love that. But
yeah, it's just hard to understand. Maybe the fact that music was changing so much in the second half of the 70s, you had disco. Well, disco started before that, but you also had, punk rock and you had new wave coming in and Ringo's putting out more of the same. It was formulaic, despite a different producers, but you had to have your cover version that you want to have as a hit. You try to get all your best friends on the record, except Hard Time. I mean, not Hard Times, except the Bad Boy album, which still you had Dr. John on there, you
yeah,
know, D. Murray, very capable people, Jimmy Webb. Um, but maybe it was just, every Ringo album's 10 songs. This is the format. We're going to try to get three singles out of it. Maybe people were tired of it at that point.
yeah, and I mean, and there's a lot of artists who are falling into that rut who just could. You had, for every Rod Stewart who was, going to disco and becoming bigger than ever, you had other artists like Gilbert O'Sullivan who couldn't even play a high school, never mind get on the radio. And he was big. He had a lot of hits in the mid 70s, right?
Right.
America, they disappeared until the mid 80s, and they came back as a middle of the road soft rock band. Smart
Hmm.
move. But in 78, they were still putting out a typical America album, and no one cared. Like it just, and I'm not trying to be mean because I like America. Everyone, I love America. They're great. The country, the song, everything. But the group, but Ringo, it's interesting that the only Beatle to kind of survive was Paul. And if you look at McCartney, he toured, he promoted, he did interviews, he was out there, he was working with a lot of other musicians at the same time. He really kept everything going. Like London Town only made it to number two because Saturday Night Fever was number one.
Hmm.
If Saturday Night Fever had never come out, London Town would have been as big as Venus of Mars. And maybe it was in terms of sales. I don't know. But you had With a Little Luck hitting number one in 78. I mean, McCartney never, George never had a top 10 album until 87 with Cloud Nine. I mean, 33 and the Third, George Harrison, all those albums, great album, brilliant, love them. But they didn't go top 10. He had lost some of his market, right? Um, and John, of course, was on his hiatus. Uh, although he did work in 76 with Ringo, just saying.
And
Uh,
that's another thing in the book, because I never knew how John even felt about Cooking in the Kitchen Above. And apparently he wasn't happy about the song and he felt like maybe, he was being used. Let's make sure we have a John song on the album because we got Paul on here and we got George, and George only gave an old song to him. He didn't even appear on the album.
and then sued him, and then threatened to sue Ringo.
He actually sued because I thought it said in the book that he
No,
was
no,
thinking, but he
threatened to
didn't.
sue. Threatened to sue. Didn't he? Didn't the lawsuit was, but he threatened to sue Ringo. Yeah,
What didn't he like about that arrangement of I'll Still Love You?
to this day, no one, even Ringo does it, and and he just didn't like it. He thought that Ringo took liberties with the song, and I'm thinking, first of all, Cilla Black, um, who else? Ronnie
Oh,
Spector.
John and Mary Russell.
Finally, someone puts it out, George. It's a great song.
Uh,
Could have been I think it was intended to be a single in Europe. Mike Hales hinted that they thought that was going to be a single, but I think because of the threat of a lawsuit, they just kind of went, "Ooh, hands off." Although he shot a video, a promo film for it, right?
yeah.
Um, So yeah, you're right. John felt he was used, and but he flew down to L.A. with Yoko and Sean, and they recorded the song in L.A. And then, but I don't know. How do you feel about Cooking in the Kitchen of Love? What's your verdict on
I
that song?
like it, but it's obviously the weakest of the three Lennon songs that he gave to Ringo.
100%. Yeah. Although it's very autobiographical of what Lennon was going through, right? Cooking in the Kitchen of Love is,
Yeah.
that's
We all would
um,
have to have heard Life Begins at 40, which John wrote for Ringo. Um, yeah. And apparently Nobody Told Me was supposed to be for Ringo.
that's right. Yeah.
I
That's
could
a
never
great book.
quote Ringo's lyrics though. Nazis in the bathroom just below the stairs. That's
Yes.
like
Greg would be going, can we change a couple of those words?
but a lot of people don't even know John saying that.
I know. Although it was it was a big hit, a good song, good song.
Number five record.
Yep.
But yeah, I do wonder, how many times in all the podcasts that I've done, we talk about Ringo's recent stuff, everything from say Time Takes Time On, and we say, well, if Weight of the World was released in 1973, it would have been a number one hit. You know, you can
Yeah.
pick a lot of songs from all the albums that he's done with the whole Mark Hudson period after that, and if it was released in that time period, it would have done much better. But also radio stations, if you're gearing towards a younger audience, you're not going to be playing an artist who's in their 40s and up. They're too old for that audience. So they have to latch on to adult contemporary or something like that, that format, and hopefully they'll get played there, which people like Elton John were so successful at, and Rod Stewart, Eric Clapton to some degree. But somebody like even Paul doesn't play that game. He
No.
wants hits. I'm sure he wants to have hits, but he doesn't say, well, this is going to be for the adult contemporary market. This is going to be for the album rock market. He doesn't think in those terms. He records what he feels like.
Yeah. And I think you hit the nail on the head. And Ringo, I think he had great hopes for Time Takes Time. I think that was the big comeback album, and it fizzled. But he also made that joke, right? I was signed to private stock records or private
Private music.
music.
Yeah.
He said I should have taken a hint by their name. Inferring they didn't promote it. Well, I don't know. I mean, it's a great album. Time Takes Time. Brilliant album.
It wasn't that long that the record company went out of business after that.
No,
So
no, it wasn't. It was actually quite quick. And but Vertical Man. I mean, there's tracks on that album that you would think should have been monsters. But you're right. The radio had changed. The record buying public had changed. CDs were a game changer. McCartney struggled. He didn't have any hits after, I guess, Flaming Pie. I remember hearing that on the radio. But after that, I mean, I've
in,
never heard songs,
in terms of chart success, well,
different.
Spy Like Us went top 10.
Great
My
song, by the way.
favorite, what's that?
Great song, by the way.
Oh, I'm glad you like it. I get a lot of people who say they think it was a horrible record.
Well,
I love it. My Brave Face went top 40.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, other than what he did with Kanye West, most of his singles just don't go very far in the United States.
The
And
albums,
his albums make the top 10 and usually the top three, but then they die a quick death because there isn't continued airplay of the music. So all the fans who want it go out and buy it quickly, and then that's it. But to me, I always felt if the music was still played, and there are people who got a chance to hear it, that it would sell a lot better. I'm not saying it would sell like Taylor Swift sells right now. I'm not deluding myself that, compared to someone who's the hottest thing right now, that the solo Beatles could sell just as well, as much as I feel they deserve it. But anyway, I digress. There's a lot of great um, older artists who are still out there making really good music, whether it's Eric Clapton or Elton John or Rod Stewart, those people, and they'll get some airplay, but it's not like it used to be. And a lot of that has to do with their age, The quality of the music is not as important as the marketing of it.
But radio's changed. Like when
That,
I was a kid,
yeah.
I remember in the 70s, Sammy Davis having hits. Sammy Davis would be played alongside the Partridge Family, Bay City Rollers, whoever, and we would hear it all. I remember in the 60s, you look at the charts and Sinatra and Dean Martin. Dean Martin made number one with Houston, which I don't think anyone could have predicted. But radio used to be more of a mishmash, right? You could turn on your top 40 station and hear brand new oldies, brand new songs, top 40. Now everything is so compartmentalized. Like you have people who will only listen to top 40, don't even know anything outside of what's in the top 40. I was talking to my niece's boyfriend, and he's like, I had no idea that Elton John's been around for so long. You're like, oh my gosh. Yeah, he's been around for a little while. Because I guess he did that record with the dance record a couple of years ago. But
Lipa.
yeah, that's one. Thank you. The
Yeah.
name at the head.
Well, he's teamed up with a lot of current artists, and that has helped the sales of his hits, but who knows with any artist what music is going to be lasting. There's a lot of people that know Elton John for his current stuff and don't know what he did in the first half of the 70s, which was amazing to me. So it's how old you are, what you listen to, and what you're exposed to, and that's what really influences your tastes. And to me, what you hear when you're young is what has the greatest impact on your life.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I've talked a lot about this, being a top 40 kid my whole life. The 60s, the 70s, the greatest variety of hit records, so many different styles. Like in the 60s, like what you were saying, you could have Louis Armstrong singing Hello Dolly, and in the same breath, you could have Roger Miller singing King of the Road, you know, and you could have a Motown hit and a Beatles hit and, everything, a novelty hit, a Ray Stevens song. It's all, a mixture of all that, and that helped to develop my tastes
Me
along
too.
with the Beatles and, my favorite artists. But it's not like that now. And I can have a debate all the time as to whether or not radio is as important as it used to be. Of course, the mere fact that, every radio station that plays music you can stream, that can only help expand your audience.
Yeah.
But, there's a lot of young people today that don't even listen to the radio. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So that limits what unless they do if you liked this song, here's some suggestions, and you go down that rabbit hole.
right.
Which I do. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I'll discover new stuff all the time, and it's not new, So usually an artist that's been around for 50 years, I'm going, oh, I never realized they were so good. Uh, but listen, I just discovered the beauty of the Carpenters. I've been going through a massive Carpenters phase, and
Wow.
I love them. Sorry, you're not a big fan?
Love them to death.
Oh, okay.
It's not just Karen Carpenter's voice, it's all the
No.
arrangements Carpenter
Yeah.
did. Yeah, it was brilliant. And they had some really good songwriters like the Paul Williams helping them
Yeah.
out. And, you're bound to get really strong material, and they were so well produced.
Oh, beautifully produced. Beautifully produced. And I mean, anyways, I digress. But anyway, so there we go.
So before we leave, the one thing
Yes.
we really didn't talk about here is Ringo records. How important really, you just spend a couple of minutes, how important do you really think his record company was? I know it says in your book that this was not a vanity project for him, but there's so many similarities between him and George Harrison having Dark Horse Records. Dark Horse didn't really do all that well, aside for George's music. Um, you know, do you think that it didn't work because of Ringo not being as actively involved with it? He had a team of people. But he was so busy between recording his own music and sometimes doing session work and acting. It's a lot for one person to do, and then have your own record company. Do you think, you know, part of the reason why Ringo didn't work out was because he was tackling too much?
I think that was part of it. I think the name of the label was killed it. I mean, it was like it was funny. Ring apostrophe O, right? No, Ring apostrophe O Records. Like in the Irish Ringo. You know, it was a yeah. He didn't record for the label. That's the big difference between him and Dark Horse, George and Ringo. George had intended to go to Dark Horse when his contract was over with the MI. Ringo was very clear from the get-go. I'm not recording for Ringo Records. This is not about me. I want to discover new artists. I love the model. We're going to put out singles, and if the singles do well, we'll put out an album. Brilliant. I mean, it was really smart.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know the Starling Music album, which is an instrumental synthesizer of the Ringo record album, was a bit of an odd start, although it's a good album. It sounds good. It sounds nice. Uh, I think there's a lot of problems with Ringo Records. I think it was part of it was he didn't necessarily. He says there's one part in the book where he talks about they had to hire a whole new team because the first team didn't really work so well. And I think they expected Polydor to pick up the slack, and Polydor is clear, we're not doing that. If this is your label, we'll distribute the records, we'll get them in the stores. But the promotion, that's you. And certainly the artists I spoke to on the Ringo record label, they said Ringo was more hands-on than but they at the same time, he wasn't pushing the records the way they should have been pushed. Graham Bonnet, my favorite story Graham Bonnet told me was when he put the first single out, It's All Over Now, Baby Blue. And he said the BBC were going to play it. And he got his parents and he got his siblings and his cousins. They're all crowded around listening to the BBC. And the announcer comes off the song and goes, It's All Over Now, Baby Blue. Well, it's certainly all over now for Graham Bonnet. That was a horrible record. So sad. Although he laughs about it. But Ringo Records, I think Ringo was quite serious with the label, but he lost tons of money on it, and it just didn't work. And it's a shame because I don't know how familiar you are with some of the artists, but Rob Noakes is quite good. Stormer, they had a pretty good sound, really. They could have gone places. Graham Bonnet did very well in Australia, as did Suzanne. I mean, Graham Bonnet made #1 with a song given to from the Bee Gees, a song that was left off of Saturday Night Fever, "Warm Wind." Uh, Very Bee Gees. If you listen to the song, you're like, really? The Bee Gees wrote that? I couldn't tell. Uh,
Right.
but
Well,
and then Ringo kind of pulled the plug on it, which is a shame. Although he tried again, right? In the 90s with Mark Hudson. Pumpkinhead Records put out
yes.
one CD by Liam Lynch, and United States of Whatever was the big hit off that album. But they just did the one record, Pumpkinhead Records, and then after that, it just kind of fizzled away.
Do you think that he had a good ear for what would sell, Ringo? Or that didn't matter as much as just trying to discover
Well,
new talent?
I'm gonna I'm gonna try to couch this as nicely as I can.
Uh-oh.
You know, have you heard Koki Koki by Colonel Bogey?
I just finished reading your book, but what I'm going to do in the next few days, just like with your Dark Horse book, got all these artists and a lot of them I didn't get to hear that were on Dark Horse. Go on YouTube and check out all this
Yeah.
stuff.
The best stuff on Ringo Records was literally Rob Noakes, a guy named Johnny Warman, who actually worked with Ringo on the Time Takes Time album. He had a big hit with Peter Gabriel called Screaming Jets. Lovely guy to talk to. But I bring up Koki Koki because when Doug Bogey
Yeah.
went to Ringo, he brought an album. He recorded a concept album about outer space, and it was all finished and it was high tech. And Ringo goes, "Yeah, no, I don't quite like it." And just as the album ended, there was this little thing that Doug Bogey had left on by accident, which was a joke thing. And Ringo's like, "Now that's a hit," and released it as a single. And in America, it came out with the flip side was the A side, "Away in the Manger." It was very synthesized reggae, odd. ABC Records put it out. They licensed it from Ringo Records, but do I think Ringo had a good ear? It was dated. Like Suzanne's got a great voice, but she's 3 years behind the times.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and Carl Grossman, who wrote A Dose of Rock and Roll, his two singles should have been hits. I don't know what happened. I really don't. They're not that bad. They're pretty good actually. So
Yeah.
check them out on YouTube. They're really worth searching out. And I'm proud to say I've got every Ringo record. So
And to
even even the whale.
What would Ringo say to that? He'd say, "You're the one."
Yes, exactly. Oh, wait a minute. Do you have this one? Yes. Really? I did. No, they reissued The Whale that was on Apple with a different cover. Uh, Ringo must have loved that album. It's the only thing I could figure. He had to have loved that album. He bought the rights from Apple and reissued it on Ringo Records,
It tells you his musical tastes were all over the place.
all over the place. No
Like
question.
Beatles. All the Beatles are that way.
Yes.
Even with John, who wanted to have that rock and roll image, 50s Elvis, that kind of thing, he loved pre rock and roll too.
Yeah.
Even Paul brought up a couple of songs from that time period, like you mentioned Bing Crosby. They had very wide tastes, the Beatles, and that's part of why their music was so creative to begin with. Everything that went on in their heads.
George Harrison doing True Love.
Oh yeah, and all the Hoagie Carmichael stuff.
Yeah.
Who was the guy you mentioned that was an original member of Queen?
Oh, Graham Bonnet.
Oh, that was Graham Bond. Okay.
Yeah. 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 I think it was, no, hang on. Yeah, Graham Bonnet. It's uh funny stories. Funny stories. I mean, the rock world is so small sometimes. In fact, Graham Bonnet auditioned for Rory Storm of the Hurricanes when Ringo left. So there
How
you
ironic
go.
is that? Didn't you tell the story he was going to tell Ringo that, but he was there were too many people around him and he couldn't get to tell him that he joined Rory Storm?
Yeah, he was trying to tell Ringo. Ringo's like, I 1 minute. Yeah, classic Ringo.
Oh,
Uh, Graham Bonnet's a great guy to talk to. And if you ever get a chance, man, the stories he tells are just out of this world. Out of this world. He's so funny. I mean, you look at his look in the 70s, he looks like a 50s cover artist, and he's doing this heavy metal. You're like, I don't know what to do right now because you look like you should be doing Sha Na Na, and you're playing Ring, and they joined Richie Blackmore's Rainbow, right? So all over the place too. But Ringo was all over the place. Bless
hmm.
him.
Okay, so let me ask you, do you have plans of following this up with the rest of Ringo's career or?
Well, I'm just 3/4 of the way through a book on a Canadian band called Clat 2,
Oh,
which
sure. Yeah.
everyone thought were the Beatles at one time. And I would like to write. I think the Ringo in the '80s would be fascinating because it was it's kind of a mysterious period. Although Stop and Smell the Roses, Old Wave, Shining Time Station, and so much to talk about. I'd like to. We'll see. I mean, it's if there's enough demand for it, if people want it, sure, I would be more than happy to. I'd love to do. I'd love to do each decade, '90s, 2000s, and I'd love to do a book about the All Stars because that's a fascinating project. But first, I got to finish my cut. My daughter likes to make a joke with me. She says, you got to work George into that book because you're creating this universe where you got Ringo and George, and then you got Klaatu has Ringo because of the Ringo Goodnight Vienna covered. People thought that was a clue. You got to figure George in there somehow. So I'll see what I can do.
All right. Well, I was going to say the 80s, it would be more about his personal life.
Yes.
Anything
Yeah.
else, 'cause, in terms of his output, it would be a thin book. I think
Well,
so. But
yeah.
it's part of the All-Stars. So,
And that was '89, right? So
fine. Yep.
I'll devote half the book to that.
Wasn't your plan to do a book on Ringo records like you did on Dark Horse?
No, I think my joke was it would be a pamphlet. Yeah, I wanted to do a Ringo record book. There just wasn't enough material, quite frankly. I mean, eh, yeah, it was once, but then it kind of scooted over to be Ringo in the '70s, and I write a lot about Ringo records in the book, so I kind
Oh,
of did
there.
it.
Okay. Well,
Kind of.
as I've said, you find out a lot about Ringo records, Ringo's films. It ain't just about his singles and albums. And where did I put the book? Here it is. Ringo Starr, solo career. Got to pay your dues from Aaron Badgley. Thank you for joining us.
Thank
Hopefully
you
we'll,
for having me. Thank you.
yeah. And thank you all the Canadians that bought Ringo stuff more than even in America.
We were
You know,
loyal.
There's one more thing now that I'm thinking about it. There's one particular person who watches my podcast, and he's from England. And he thinks of everything in terms of how well everything sold in England. And in the case of Ringo and George, their careers tanked very quickly. I mean, even Goodnight Vienna didn't do that well for Ringo. It was like the Ringo album was the peak, and then after that, I mean, it just went downhill. And George, it did better than Ringo, but still, it was almost like they were has-beens by the second half of the 70s. Do you have any idea why there was that attitude in England? Because Paul certainly wasn't treated that way. And John took his 5-year break, but I believe that had John lived, he would have continued having more and more success. That's my
I think
personal.
I think that there was so much going on in England in the 70s that I think Ringo and George were seen as a wee bit out of touch, where Paul and John, I mean, when John was, Walls and Bridges and rock and roll and stuff, Paul, I mean, McCartney got horrible reviews by critics, but I think George and Ringo just seemed to be. I remember reading one review for Ringo, and they said, he should be a game show host, like that kind of thing, where it just didn't. They didn't take it seriously like they did. Um, oh, it's the only thing I can think of. I also think that the economics in England in the 70s, and if you look at their charts, certainly their album charts are mostly compilation albums. You see given any week in the 1970s, you got greatest hits by Jim Reeves or Tammy Wynette or like a K Tel kind of album. There was very little money being spent on records, and the money that was being spent, Elton John was kind of capitalizing and all. And I just think Ringo and George are seen as a wee bit out of touch, and I don't know why, but they were. And it's again, it's they weren't that huge. They weren't that big in England. The solo artists as George and Ringo just, by the way, Sentimental Journey did better on the charts in the UK than Ringo.
Yes, I know. And it might surprise a lot of people watching this. What was the biggest chart single Ringo had in the UK?
Which was
Back Off
Back Off
Boogaloo.
Blue.
You might not have thought that. You probably think, oh, it's got to be Photograph. It's got to be It Don't Come Easy. But Back Off Boogaloo went to number two, and that was his
Yeah,
highest charting single there.
chart, yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I find it fascinating. It's one of those mysteries. Well, even Whatever Gets You Through the Night wasn't a huge hit in the UK, right? Made number one in America, but not in the UK.
It's
And it's
fascinating.
got all.
Different markets. And you would think in England, they'd be a little bit more loyal to the Beatles.
But do you ever wonder that maybe it was because John and Ringo were living in the States that they felt a bit betrayed by them, whereas George and Paul had stayed in England, and Paul was very British, and
Hmm.
Ringo was in LA, Lennon was in New York, and I wonder if sometimes that worked against them in the UK.
It's a good point. Something to think about.
Yeah, we led them in Canada though.
Evidently. All
Uh,
right. Thank you so much for doing this. Good
thank
luck
you.
with this book, and
Thank,
hopefully you'll be back soon.
I hope so, and thanks for having me on. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and I
Okay.
love your show. I watch it on you, so keep up the good work, man. You're great.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thanks to everybody watching, and we'll see you real soon.